evening and thank you so much for joining us as we continue with our special focus on coronavirus. India effectively now has waged a war against this disease. As we speak, viewers, about 23 states are in a complete lockdown situation in our country, while most of the remaining states are in an almost shutdown mode. As citizens now struggle to adapt to this new, completely unknown and alien way of living with restrictions and rules all around, we saw several instances of violations. We saw several instances of non-compliance, of confusion and chaos. What exactly is the rule? How am I supposed to follow it? And in fact, we are going to highlight some of those instances for you in the coming few minutes. This happened as more and more states headed for stringent restrictions in the coming days. Now, let's begin with 6 different ways through which lockdown can be implemented effectively. And we have collated these 6 ways basis what our reporters saw on ground today. Where there was an issue, where there was a confusion, where people were still crowding in buses, at entry points to a city or an exit point to a city, in your sabji mandi, a place where you still saw people, literally standing shoulder to shoulder. How do we avoid such situations? That's a big point. And I'm actually going to go across to our managing editor, Vinay Tiwari, who's joining me from our newsroom with 6 ways to improve this lockdown. Vinay?
Yes, so Tanvi, of course, on day one of nearly a countrywide lockdown, of course, we don't want to sound too harsh and say that the government wasn't doing its job well. We are all learning how to do things. I think the overarching responsibility is on the people to actually follow the rule of staying at home. That's the best way to do it. But then, from what our reporters saw on the ground, there are 6 things that we broke down where the implementation can be made a little more effectively from day after. Number 1, we observed, in the national capital especially, where the border between Gurugram and Delhi, for instance, or Noida and Delhi, there were barricades and only a single barricade at the border. Now, our argument against this is only this, that you need to come up with a philosophy which is called a graded barricading system, which means instead of putting just one barricade right at the border, you need to start putting up barricades, say 500 meters or 1 kilometer or maybe another kilometer, and 2-3 layers of them, because that effectively reduces the flow of the traffic and avoids a jumbling up of a lot of cars at the border. Because remember, the police has to check whether you belong to the essential services or not before they allow you through. And that crowding that is happening at the border is something that can be avoided simply by doing a graded barricading response system, so that the number of vehicles that finally make it to the last one can be reduced. That's the first big point which we observed. The second big point, a lot of the lockdown measures because remember, the central government has advised states to implement lockdown measures because they are part of state subject. Police is law and order is a state subject. Civic agencies have their own jurisdictions of cities. So obviously, the state governments and the city administrations have to issue those orders. Now, in many cases, there has been an inconsistency in the kind of orders that have been issued between contiguous cities. For instance, Gurgaon and Delhi. Now, Delhi is a separate jurisdiction and Gurgaon is Haryana government. Now, unless the orders of these 2 districts is identical in nature, it defeats the purpose, because people in Gurgaon are not following a full lockdown, whereas Delhi is. And hence, they are actually landing up at the border only to discover that they cannot enter or exit that place. So, the NCR region, for instance, in Mumbai, for instance, whether it is Thane or Panvel or any other part which is part of a suburban area, it needs to have a contiguous rule and not a differentiated rule. The problem is probably more acute in North, in Delhi, because there are 3 different states that surround the national capital, not so much in Maharashtra, where there is one government which makes all the decisions. Number 3, what we observed, essential supplies include vegetable and fruit vendors, which is necessary because people have to buy vegetables and fruits. Also remember, not everybody has the paying capability to buy fruits and vegetables in bulk for 15 days or 3 weeks and keep them. So obviously, there are people who are going to come out and buy it. But what the government and the authorities should do is to ensure that the hawkers that are sitting on the streets should sit at a distance of at least 5 meters or so. Remember, with everything else being shut down, the road spaces available in cities is now more. So for a temporary period, you can actually force the vendors to sit at a distance, and that will allow the crowding to reduce if people are coming out and buying the essentials. 4, we also saw that there are some cities which are running public transport, like government buses, which are solely and principally responsible for picking up government employees that are supposed to be working. But because the number of those buses are less, and remember, other modes of transport have been shut down. For instance, in Delhi, the metro has been shut down. Those buses are showing overcrowding. Now, the only way you can solve that problem is to actually pump in more buses on those routes where government officials must necessarily take them. So that's very, very important. Number 5, even though government offices have now also implemented a reduction in the workforce, some 50%, some less than 5%, some 25%, you still need to stagger the duty timings. And the staggering of timings cannot be half an hour or 1 hour. Possibly it should be even longer than 1 hour, even though we recommend maybe 1 hour, but it could even be 2 hours, so that the crowding at one particular time in public transport or any other form of transport is reduced. And the last one, again, something we learned from talking to people on the ground, because when our reporters were speaking to people who were traveling in these public transport, they said that some of them said that their company had not shut down and that because they were depending on daily earnings, they had to go. The government must start effectively checking that except those essential services that have been listed in every order, all the other companies must follow the rule of work from home or reduction in the staff strength, Tanvi.
Yes, in fact, that part was very surprising, Vinay, because most companies that we know have already, at least in Mumbai and Delhi, have already implemented a work-from-home policy, keeping in mind the situation. So, but if there still are, those companies need to relook, and government perhaps needs to get stricter with such corporates. Thanks, Vinay Tiwari, so much for really putting those 6 points in perspective. Now, before I go across to our panelists, and we're going to break it down one by one, all of these 6 points. Point number 1 is the kind of traffic jams that we saw at the entrance of Delhi from Noida, the D&D flyover that connects Noida to Delhi. Now, as Delhi decided yesterday to shut down its borders and not allow traffic between, from its neighboring cities and states, it became a huge problem. And like Vinay was pointing out, it became a problem because right at the end, you stopped all the vehicles altogether and then started checking them and asking them questions. Here is a report that a reporter got from us, for us, from that location. Take a look, you'll understand what we are talking about better.
On the first day of complete lockdown in the national capital and Noida, there's complete chaos that's prevailing on the streets. Right now we are reporting from the D&D, and this is the Delhi part of the D&D. You can see clearly, I mean, there's a lot of confusion among people on exactly what they need to do, because many of them came out, many of them defied orders, many of them, of course, are from services that are essentials, but the police on ground does not have a clear instruction on what to do, and that's exactly the reason that chaos is in fact prevailing here. You see some negotiations also going on with people and the police here, but the fact is, on ground, there's no clarity on who will be allowed, because this is the first day of the complete lockdown, and this is how it looks like on the Delhi side of the D&D, and also the situation is pretty same on the other side of it also, with vehicles not being allowed entry and a passage on this particular highway and expressway. The point is, this is happening only because there is no clarity on who will be allowed, and there's also a complete lack of information on part of people, and also the habit that they have maintained that perhaps they will come out no matter what. On the streets time, people stay home, and that's the reason lockdown has been imposed.
So let's begin with this. Point number 1, how to ensure that these kind of issues don't crop up. And it's not just in Delhi. The same would happen in Mumbai, where we begin to seal our borders between different districts. How are people from Thane going to enter the city of Mumbai, even if they're working for essential services and they need to get to their workplace in government offices? How's that going to take place? Let's say good evening to Mr. A.L. Banerjee, former DGP of Uttar Pradesh, Dr. D Prabhakaran, Vice President for Research and Policy at Public Health Policy of India, T.R. Raghunandan, former IS officer, and Dr. Rohit Baluja, Director of the Institute of Road Traffic Education and College of Traffic Management. In fact, Dr. Baluja, if I could begin with you, because a lot of these issues that we saw today were at these points where traffic was building up. And in fact, reports came in later that at D&D between Noida and Delhi, people started coming out and then arguing with the toll operators to say, you have to let us go. There was quite a bit of chaos and confusion. What can be the solution to such a problem? A kind of a staggered checking where you start turning vehicles back? What should the authorities look at?
No, I think the policy making is by the government at the center or at the states, but there is no coordination perhaps with the local traffic police or the local police. I think it is important that till the confusion is sorted, people should be allowed to slowly move and get out of. There should be no traffic jams. The police coordination or facing the public should be reduced until the people understand, because people are not culprits. Suddenly, the policies have come in. We need to make sure that people are advised through television and your channels to go and not, this should be avoided. Secondly, while the people are coming out of it, we see that there is a huge, high amount of speeds in isolated areas, and people are really violating. At this time, there is a need for compliance, but until clarity happens, traffic jams should be avoided. People should be slowly asked to move and let them move and tell them to go home and be at their places. This is what is the first and most important thing until clarity comes in.
This will be, Dr. Baluja, a big challenge, like you said, while those sitting in offices are designing these policies and issuing the statements or orders and circulars, the ones on ground actually sometimes don't know about it. In Mumbai itself today, I saw many examples where those manning the traffic on ground were not too sure who's allowed to go, who's not. Now, how do you ensure that in a crisis, in a pandemic situation, you get the message out clearly to every single soldier on the ground?
And also one more thing is important, that the national capital region, like Delhi police you said, and the Haryana police and UP police, now they have to have a lot of interactions amongst them. The law and order and traffic police together must frame policies of what needs to be done 24 hours a day. And that coordination is very important, and it has to be between the border polices, both law and order and traffic police, to resolve this problem.
Mr. Banerjee, would you want to add to this as well? The point number one that we've highlighted, in many areas along the borders, entry points to the city, I mean, traffic jam is not really a preferable or advisable situation right now.
You are right. You see, the fact is that these are very, very early days. In fact, the first day of the lockdown,
yes,
as far as an undefined and an unseen enemy and a war that we are fighting. Now, in this, certain issues are bound to crop up. As far as the coordination between the three police forces are concerned, yes, there should be a mandate, or there should be a meeting of these people, and 3 nodal officers should be chosen for this particular thing, which can be done in an hour's time. They must be doing it right now if they have not done it by now. But taking into consideration the fact that this has happened in the D&D flyover, they must be doing it. Number 2, you see, it is the kind of yesterday when there was this Janta curfew, people thought that it is over by 5 o'clock. You've seen people coming out with symbols and all kinds of instruments onto the streets, literally celebrating the end of coronavirus. It's not so. The message has to sink in that stay indoor. You have to stay indoor, come what may. Now, until and unless that happens, and for that, information has to be given. Unfortunately, our social media is giving all kinds of information, but there is no official information which can be termed as the standpoint from which to judge everything else. So there ought to be, for the policemen on the ground, those who are managing things, a control room from which they can ask who can be permitted and who cannot be permitted. Similarly, there should be coordination and dissemination of information. For Bombay, today I got a call. I am part of a Kidney Warrior Foundation where there are a lot of kidney patients who are on dialysis. You see, dialysis is a thing which has to be done either thrice a week or twice a week. Now, these people, thousands of them, in Bombay there must be at least 1,000 plus people, or even more than that. They just couldn't get going, and their dialysis dates are there. The cops have been stopping them. So I talked to the Commissioner of Police today, and he was very helpful. They are working it out. Similarly, this kind of a thing has to be done across the country. And these are very early days. We have to learn how to go about it and do it. So on your channel, I shall appeal to everybody to at least help the medical emergencies in this case. Kidney dialysis is an emergency, because without that, the person cannot survive. Similarly, these are the, and until unless information is given, and as Mr. Tiwari was very correct, you have to have graded checking systems by which you can send away people or disburse people. But the basic point is stay at home. That has to be ensured.
Yes, absolutely. Stay at home. Um, Unfortunately, we've heard today from the Maharashtra Chief Minister, we heard today from the Delhi Chief Minister and several others where they said that people are not really still, taking this seriously and following it diligently, which is why they have to come up with stricter restrictions and stricter norms. But one thing that I want to understand, and Dr. Prabhakaran, maybe you can come on this, how does it help if Delhi has a set of rules and restrictions, but Noida has a different set of rules and restrictions, and Gurgaon has a different set? They're all neighboring. There is a bit of a travel that happens between these three cities. And so if UP government isn't in tandem with Delhi government's restrictions, then does that help?
Thank you for having me here. It's an important question. I don't think that kind of if you have different set of rules in each of these cities, it's going to help. As Dr. Baluja said, I think the most important thing is coordination and communication. And coordination is very important. You should have the same set of rules, and because these are all interlinked cities, and people travel between these cities regularly. So whatever planning that we do, whatever we ask for from the people, it has to be very similar. You cannot have different things, and it will lead to chaos and confusion if we have a different set of rules in each of these cities. I think the most important thing that needs to be conveyed to people is social distance, that you self-isolate at home. You just go out only for bare essentials, like, for example, buying groceries, going to hospitals, or buying medicines, because the maximum distance we maintain between people, we actually help the cause in terms of reducing the transmission. That message has to be conveyed loud and clear.
In fact, I will take this a step further and say, while for example, in Maharashtra, Mumbai has these satellite cities of Thane and Navi Mumbai, but the same government is taking decisions for all of them. And so the government has decided, basis the number of cases, that there will be a complete lockdown, not just in Mumbai, but also Thane, Navi Mumbai, and Pune. That's not what we are seeing, at least in Delhi, in Noida, and Gurgaon. Mr. Raghunandan, it's also a big challenge for the authorities, but how do we ensure there is higher coordination and cooperation on this, so that we have a set of similar restrictions for neighboring states?
I would go by the South Indian example, where we don't have that much of a problem as Delhi. So it was first Tamil Nadu that introduced the clampdown, then Kerala almost simultaneously, and then Karnataka, and then Andhra is the last. But since these borders are far apart, and it's not like Bangalore is not like Delhi, I think the problem is a little easier to solve. Delhi really has a problem, and because it is almost a continuous urban habitation, and these boundaries are virtually artificial boundaries for commuters, even though they are interstate commuters. Technically, they are actually commuters within the same urban agglomeration. So I would go with what the former DGP of UP said, and your very perceptive reporter said, that we must have graded barricades, so that people understand this well in time. And I think people should also cooperate. And I completely agree with the fact that social media has just created so much of confusion. And yesterday's, it was actually quite ridiculous. It was, how people were out there celebrating the end of coronavirus and things like that. I think these messages have to be very punchy, very clear. And I don't think that we should be announcing all these gimmicks about celebration and congratulating the the doctors and things like that, because these are apt to be misunderstood. I mean, I don't think the Prime Minister said anything of the nature what was being repeated in social media, but yet that is what is all that is remembered from the Prime Minister's speech. He said a lot of sensible things. He told us to stay at home. He told people who are older, who have higher risk factors, to stay at home. And that was not what was seen yesterday at 5 o'clock when the celebrations started. So I think it's something where citizens have to cooperate, and the communication to citizens have to be very, very simple, punchy, and it has to be in very simple, clear, no terms. It is not maybe, yes, so, and so on and so forth. Messages have to be clear, and people who are at risk should be told, no, you will stay at home. Actually, Karnataka has done that pretty well. I know of places where people who are above the age of 65, who are vulnerable, who have come from abroad, I mean, you call up the city corporation gives you a registration number. They constantly check up whether you are okay and that you are not allowed to move, and they are virtually ready to track you. And I think that kind of system has to be imposed. But
Okay.
I do sympathize with the people and authorities in Delhi because it is just one continuous urban agglomeration, and the borders, the state borders, are just artificial, and
Yes.
that's going to be a problem.
Yes, some of these places have now begun to say that they're going to shut down their state borders. But I would also believe that, pretty much everybody is now in the same boat. It doesn't really help having different sets of restrictions and shutdowns. We all need to have a similar set of rules and treat this entire country as one entity now, where now more and more cases are even coming out from states where we didn't see them earlier. Now, I want to move on to point number 3. So we spoke about, border areas and traffic at interstate borders or intercity borders. We spoke about having a uniform set of rules. Now I want to talk about what we saw today. Despite in many places even section 144, there is no absolute curfew. At some point, people will come out to buy their daily essentials. And so what we saw in many places, in sabji mandis and various markets of our cities, is that there was a lot of crowding. The vegetable vendors were standing close to each other. There was a huge amount of crowd where people were buying these vegetables. And this needs to also be looked into. Now, Mr. Raghunandan, if I can ask you on that before I go on to our other panelists, is it not possible that at a time when streets are empty, we ask the market to be expanded a little so that there is a safe amount of distance between various vendors and shops?
Absolutely. You see, I live on the periphery of Bangalore, and in the periphery areas of Bangalore, there are a lot of villages which have become now part of the city. And these villages have continued to have their traditional haats. Now, what has happened is that these traditional haats have been banned. They happen just once a week, they have been banned. But these are things that where people do come, it's legitimate, people do come and buy. And so what you could do is actually rearrange the traditional haat so that people don't sit so close to each other and they can be spread out. And I think if you counsel the vegetable vendors who come there, because they are traditional vendors who come there, they've been sitting there for a long time, since time immemorial. So I am sure that they will begin to understand that they can sit in the same place, but they are somewhat spaced outward. I also think that, I mean, because in Bangalore, you also have a good culture of home deliveries, which happen, at least in the more built up areas of the city, and certainly in the IT areas and so on and so forth, where people are habituated to buy stuff online. I think we should encourage the purchase of stuff online. I also think that the other thing that you should do is look at gated communities. And this is a feature of many of the new built up areas, particularly in Bangalore and other places. And I think a gated community should be considered to be like a self-governing entity. I mean, if you take a gated community with say 10 blocks of flats, it has a population of almost that of a Gram Panchayat, right? And so if you can ensure that on an appointed date, there is a vegetable van that goes there, sells stuff to them, and it comes back, and everything is explained that they've got to wash the vegetables, take it out properly, and social distance is maintained, I think it can be worked out. But for this, it cannot only be the government issuing instructions. In fact, I have been monitoring some of the internal instructions being issued by some of the gated communities and apartment complexes. In fact, I chanced upon something that has been done in Pune, and they're so good. They're so good because people have got together, use their common sense, ensure that there is social distancing, ensure that there are 4 or 5 things that everybody does right in a gated community, which looks at security, which looks at using of the lifts,
Right.
cleanliness, waste management, and you can also include provision supply within that.
Right.
So
Oh,
I think
yes.
these are arrangements where people should contribute. People should show initiative and show leadership and come forward.
I think people need to also understand that if everybody starts going to the vegetable market at 6 in the morning or 7 in the morning, as per their usual life routine, it could get problematic. And so everybody has to start looking at different options so that we spread it out. But Dr. Prabhakaran, for those who need to go out and still buy their vegetables, what would be the suggestion? They could end up in a place where the usual norms of social distancing are not being followed.
Right. I agree with, first of all, I agree with Dr. Raghunandan, and I think there are additional things that can be done. Like, for example, if you're going to get into a small shop, uh, the shop itself can regulate the number of people who enter at a given point of time, 3 or 4 people at a point of time, and then they come out and others get in. But as far as people who have to go and do purchases are concerned, if you are older than 60 years, if you have diabetes, hypertension, or any other heart disease, cardiac surgery, cancer, and so on, it's better to designate somebody from the family to go to the shop and buy the groceries for them. And even if they have to go, I think it will be important for them to wear a mask and go, because the chances of getting an infection from others is, I'm not saying that it will be completely nullified, but the chances will get diminished. The second thing is they try and maintain mandatorily the distance from others. I mean, anybody in a market or anybody in a crowded area could be a potential source of infection, and we should take that into consideration and maintain a distance of 1 to 2 meters. It's hard, but be conscious of that and try to do that. The third thing is, as soon as you come back home, wash your hands thoroughly, because you would have touched surfaces, you would have touched someone, and dispose of the mask, because it would be kind of infected. So I think some of these precautions need to be taken, but I would really reinforce this, that if you're above the age of 60 years, you have underlying diseases such as hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, you're a post-bypass surgery, you have cancer, please do not go out of the house. Designate somebody to buy and come, and try and avoid crowding as much as possible.
Yes. In fact, I just want to show you the visuals that we were just playing a short while ago that showed the state of a market in Kanpur in Uttar Pradesh. And it looks like any other day. That's the extent of, people and crowd that we saw on the streets. Look at that. It's as if they have no idea that there is something called coronavirus that's, taken over the world. And there are advisories and rules and restrictions regarding social distancing. But our correspondent in Mumbai actually got us this report, and I think everybody needs to look at it. And maybe what the policemen are doing here, we need to start implementing it at a bigger level, where you need troops on ground to tell the vendors to maintain a certain amount of distance between them, between the shops, between the street vendors. Perhaps a one-on-one instruction has to go out so we can ensure that this kind of crowding doesn't take place. Take a look at this report.
We are here at Matunga's Sabzi Mandi, which comes in the central suburbs of Mumbai, and with the government of Maharashtra ordering strict measures that needs to be taken on the ground level. For instance, 144 section has been imposed across the state. We have seen specifically here in the city of Matunga, people have come out in very small numbers is what we can see at this point in time. This is a Matunga Sabzi that we are looking at, showing far off from the distance, and outside here we can see small vendors who are supplying vegetables to the people here in concern, and we can see that social distancing is the aspect that has not been followed, especially by the small vendors, by the street vendors here in concern. There is no minimum distance that we can see between the two vendors, and that is why people who also come and buy, they also do not really have that kind of distance maintained between the street vendor and the customer who is buying at this point in time. Definitely vegetable is an essential commodity, and the government has said that all of these operations will continue of supplying vegetables and essential items, but keeping in mind the social distancing aspect, keeping in mind that people do not really gather here in groups, and this is what we are looking at this point in time. In fact, earlier during the day we also saw policemen, we also saw security police personnel and traffic policemen coming and really asking people not to gather here in groups because the 144 section has been imposed across the state. With video journalist Manoj, this is Disha Shah reporting here for Mirror Now from Mumbai.
So perhaps, what the cops are attempting to do there needs to officially and at a larger level be done a lot more by various government authorities. Mr. Banerjee, is it possible, or is it too much of stress even on the police authorities at a time when there is so much that they have to look at?
See, police right now all across the country is faced with a warlike situation for which it has never been trained, a health emergency. It is time, I think, that the government has to think whether there should be some kind of a control on the social media and further education of the people, because all these people who are out on the streets mostly, the first thing is, of course, they require to be there because they need that thing. The second thing is that most of them believe and feel that nothing is going to happen to them. The government is locking down only because of 2 or 3 earlier things which have happened. And as the scientists have said, rightly on this panel also, you see, in Wuhan, the whole thing spread because a couple of days before it started spreading, there was a huge lunch, afternoon lunch potluck, where 40,000 people attended. And most of the people who were affected were part of that. About 10 days or 14 days later from that particular potluck emerged most of the people who had been affected. So here is again, we are thinking, the point is that how do you do that? The police is definitely overstretched. You have to implement 144. You have to look at the traffic. You have to look at the law and order. You have to look at the investigation. You have to look at everything. And this is literally the only executive arm you have which implements most of the orders. In fact, even the municipality, which can do certain things, has to fall back upon the police. So therefore, until and unless the people cooperate, as rightly said, they have to cooperate, and they can only cooperate if they are educated. Time and again, time and again, time and again. But we are basically only talking about the urban areas. In smaller rural areas, I don't know what kind of social distancing is taking place and what actually is happening. It still is a very open case.
Yes, you know, and my concern also is, and at some later stage we will discuss that as things shut down and as the economic activity and everything else shuts down in the cities, you are actually seeing a huge amount of the migrant population go back to their homes. And if any of them have actually already been infected, they'll actually be taking it now to the interiors of the country where in most parts we've not seen reports so far. So that's the other thing that the authorities will have to start looking at. Let's move on to point number 4, 6 ways to improve the lockdown. One big issue that we saw in some of our cities today, despite the strict laws of lockdown, is that there was crowding in public transport. Now, what happened is, to reduce travel of people, for example, in Delhi, the government decided to shut down the metro services. In Mumbai, the locals were impacted, which effectively meant that there were more people who are in various government offices or part of essential services where they still have to travel and get to work. They were all crowding in these buses. Now, that's not as advisable either. Well, here is actually a live visual that's coming right now from Madhya Pradesh, where Shivraj Singh Chauhan is expected to swear in at 9 p.m. And here's a bus full of netas. I'm sure these netas very well believe that they are above all these kinds of infection and these restrictions. And so obviously the norms of social distancing don't matter to them. Again and again, unfortunately, we've seen our netas, instead of leading us from the front, are leading us in terms of flouting the norms. Wait and watch as more visuals come as we build up towards that swearing-in ceremony. Netas in Madhya Pradesh all packed into one bus and completely disregarding the social distancing norms. I was actually going to play you out a instance that we got from Delhi where our reporter traveled in a bus. But this is a live example that we've got right here. What do we do in such a situation, Mr. Raghunandan, where the netas only don't follow the norms?
They're using masks as a fashion accessory around their neck. Look, they look quite nice that way, you see. That's even worse than just crowding. I mean, yeah, I think one of the real problems that has been, I mean, even in Karnataka, you had the social distancing and all that announced, and the very next day the chief minister goes and attends the wedding of an MLA's daughter and breaks the norms. So I think that this is an opportunity for Indians to behave like leaders instead of trying to take leadership lessons from their netas. I mean, the netas are not really the best examples at present, because netas, I think, I don't know what they believe. Are they going to sue Corona for privilege in case one of them contracts the disease? This is a time really for us to show our patriotism by actually behaving in the manner in which you are expected to do. I mean, take my example. I am more than 60 years old, and I have a couple of health conditions that puts me in the risk category. I have not stepped out. That is the duty I will perform to my nation. I am not going to participate in any heroics by stepping out, because if I step out and if I contract the disease, then I am putting a very stressed medical system under more stress. It is my duty not to catch the disease. It is my duty to follow the norms strictly, and that leadership has to come from within. So I think we really can tackle this only if we behave in a highly decentralized fashion. I again want to go back to that gated community, which has actually become like a unit of self-governance. They are imposing discipline.
Yes.
They are preventing people who are above 65 from moving out of their houses.
Yes.
It is that kind of vigilance that we've got to keep, not look for lessons from our netas.
No, I know you're right. You say that this is not the time. Perhaps we should look towards our netas for leading by example. I don't know when we will. We've not really seen too many examples, but this is really, really disappointing. And now they have an example. They had an example of this very famous, popular singer who traveled from abroad, went for 3 parties, essentially leading to a situation where the Rashtrapati Bhavan officials were looking at the possibility of cutting down all his social engagements, because somebody who had been exposed to a coronavirus patient had attended an event at Rashtrapati Bhavan, where a handful of MPs right now, as we speak, are in a quarantine because they all met this one MP who partied with this singer. Now, if the netas still believe that they are above this, I don't know, how we can educate them, because they obviously are not watching news. And so they're all piling up in a bus, holding hands, celebrating. Same group of people, by the way, just were celebrating a couple of days ago when Kamal Nath actually resigned. And it was very clear that Shivraj Singh Chauhan will be forming a government, and they were all celebrating. Now they're going in for the swearing-in ceremony. Prime Minister Modi has used a hashtag, stay home. Hashtag stay home. Somebody forgot to tell these netas about it. Let me bring you that report I was talking about before I go across to our go back to our panelists. This is a report Priyank filed from a crowded bus in Delhi, and then we'll talk about how to fix this issue. Take a look.
Is the national capital prepared for social distancing? We are on ground to check that whether the kind of effort which has been assured by the government is actually looking into place. 25% buses will ply, and these are the people who have been waiting for the DTC buses to arrive. And as you can see, there are, so many people who are traveling by these DTC buses. There's very less of space which is visible in these DTC buses. We would like to go ahead and show you that how people are maintaining. We have been talking about social distancing, but this is the situation on the ground where these people who are government officials, government employees are, are supposed to use. Sir, आप लोग government office में काम करते हैं, कहाँ काम करते हैं?
Civic center.
हाँ?
Civic center.
Civic center में काम करते हैं. तो आप के पास पर्सनल गाड़ी अगर नहीं है तो कैसे ट्रैवल करेंगे?
हम तो मेट्रो से करते हैं.
अच्छा. जी. और मेट्रो बंद हो गई?
तो बस से जा रहे हैं.
बट बस में इतनी ज्यादा भीड़ है, सरकार ने कुछ इंतजाम आपको लगता है कम किया?
इंतजाम तो बहुत.
कैसे ट्रैवल कर रहे हैं आप लोग?
क्या कर सकते हैं जब अपने पास कन्वेंस नहीं है तो. बैंक ऑफ बड़ौदा जनकपुरी में
प्राइवेट वाले जो है ना, प्राइवेट वाले ऑफिस वाले, मैं बैंक में काम करता हूँ. प्राइवेट ऑफिस वाले कोई छुट्टी नहीं कर रखे हैं.
हाँ.
सारे लोगों ने अपने स्टाफ को बुलाया हुआ है.
हाँ.
जबकि गवर्नमेंट ने ऑर्डर दिया है कि सारे बंद कर दो.
जी.
तो किसी ने कोई बंद नहीं किया हुआ.
हाँ.
मुझे तो जाना पड़ रहा है क्योंकि मैं बैंक में काम करता हूँ. बाकी जो ये भीड़ भाड़ आ रही है, ये कोई भी गवर्नमेंट एम्प्लॉय नहीं है, तो इनको कहाँ जाना है?
फोर्स किया जा रहा है. क्या कहना चाहते हैं आप? इतनी भीड़ है, आपको लगता है बसें और ज्यादा होनी चाहिए थी, जिनको एक्चुअली जरूरत है, जिनके पास गाड़ियाँ नहीं है?
जी सर, जरूरत थी. 25% से ज़्यादा बसें चलानी चाहिए थी. दूसरी बात ये, जिनको नीड है ऑफिस के लिए वही जाए. इसमें लोग पर्सनल वर्क के लिए भी जा रहे हैं, मैं बैंक में काम करता हूँ, कैशियर हूँ, मेरे को जाना जरूरी है.
So we are traveling across the length and breadth of the national capital. You can imagine in the kind of situation I'm stuck into. There's very less of space for me and my video journalist Vimal to move even an inch. There are, government officials who are bound to work, who are bound to move, but certainly the manner in which these arrangements have been made is certainly not the thing which the country desires for.
Now, this is a very interesting point, Dr. Baluja. What do we do? What does the government do? I am assuming they went in with the intention of shutting down a lot of public transport to reduce the travel of people. But obviously, this is not what we wanted.
See, in these next 3-4 days, we need to understand the needs of people. We are not a communist country. There are thousands and thousands of labor who have come from various neighboring states who want to go back. There's a fear psychosis. We need to understand that they need to reach home. So some sort of a transportation needs to be there. In the urban areas, we are talking of Amazon type of services. But what about, are we giving them some sort of, have we developed a policy that they can come and deliver at home? What should they be doing? What is their understanding? Between these neighboring states, the national capital region, we need to actually build capacity or have a coordination or training of our police services. And there has to be a control room to understand what is needed. Tomorrow evening, tomorrow night, 12 o'clock, the domestic flights will be closed. So there are going to be a huge amount of people who are coming to the airport. Do we understand how to bring them? So there is a need of a policy discussion. There is a need of a control room. There is a need of a coordinated system to work this out for the next 3-4 days. Then I think things would be okay. But these 2-3 days are crucial, that we are a bit flexible, we understand the needs, and we have a policy formation, at least for delivery agents or agents who are delivering vegetables or food or whatever, so that people don't go out. That's my take. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Banerjee, I want to bring you in as well on this part, because, what we are looking at is a situation where there are still an X amount of people who have to travel, even within the cities, let alone, the part that some may want to go home at this point. Within the city, there are government officials, those working for emergency and essential services who still have to go. Is there a way of mapping out specific routes, specific catchment areas, and then putting additional buses just there? Is that what we can look at?
No.
I think so. I think Mr. Baluja would be in a better position to talk about it.
Sorry.
Because he's an ex... Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Baluja. It's your question, in fact.
Yes, Mr. Baluja. Go ahead, please.
No, I think we really cannot map out everything today, because I was called today to say that so many labor people are wanting to go back to where they're coming from. And so they're crowding the bus stops, but they're unable to reach out. They're local people. We still don't know whether, for example, the vendors of the sabziwalas from the mandi, from Azadpur mandi to the local mandis, are we still open to allow them to come? The central government and state government services, I think we should be able to map out to some extent, but there has to be a control system. There has to be a discussion. Policy making is one, but to making it happen is one. And so with just 25% of buses, this will not work out. Next 3 days, then we can ask people to stay at home, but let them go, let them be there, or let them have policy. For example, today, I'm ordering food to come by Amazon services or Flipkart or whatever, but we are unable to deliver because the policy says everything is closed. Can we give them special coupons or special licenses? Can we tell them how to do it so that they are safe and we all remain at home in urban areas? So a discussion is needed at this time.
Dr. Prabhakaran, would you want to add to this? Going forward, and obviously we are in the long haul, a lot of these issues will have to be looked at to streamline it.
Right. I mean, I agree with all the previous speakers. I would have imagined that all the 100% of the buses should have run so that the number of people in each of the buses would have been much less.
Lesser.
When you reduce the number of buses, obviously the people are going to crowd to the buses. The second thing is, I think we look forward to a leadership from our politicians, religious leaders, social leaders, village panchayat leaders. I mean, they have the power to influence people, and they need to use that power to socially influence them in terms of maintaining the social distance. But of course, we do have problems of the poor, the migrant labor, and others who need to go back to the villages, and we need to have some kind of solution for them. And for that, everybody, we need to work as a unit. We need to forget our political affiliations, our religious affiliations, and all that. Work as a unit, work as a country to solve this problem.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, we're going to have this chaos.
I agree with you on that front. Mr. Raghurandan, let me ask you as well. Do you think it was a good idea to reduce the number of buses plying, especially when you decided to shut down metro services as well? What should be the way going forward? Because even Bengaluru, Mumbai will struggle with the same problem.
I think it was a bad idea to reduce the number of buses and also to shut down the metro. What we should have done is to insist upon people who are not required to travel to stay at home and kept the number of vehicles and the metro running, because then there will be space for social distancing within the public transport system. By reducing the number of public transport vehicles, I don't think you can achieve social distancing, because there will still be essential people who are supposed to come and they will have to travel in a diminished public transport space. So they should have kept the numbers of the buses and the metro open, but clamped down on the number of people actually traveling. You could have put controls at the metro stations and asked people, only if you produce a government ID card are you allowed to board a metro. But it is not by by taking away the metro, what you have done is you have actually, it has been counterproductive. You have not provided the space for people to keep social distance whilst in public transport. So I think this was badly thought out, but I think, the whole point is this is so totally unprecedented. So I think there is be some leeway to make a mistake. I just want to make one point that, if there's a 15% increase on the previous day's numbers of cases which have corona, that means you are in exponential growth. I did a calculation based on that conservative 15% per day for every day, and my calculation shows that by end of March, we will have about 1,000 cases. By end of April, we will have about 59,000 cases. And by end of May, you will have 45 lakh cases, right? And ever since I have started that calculation, on every single day, we have exceeded my 15% conservative markup. That is what is really worrying me. And so therefore, whatever we are doing, I think we need to get our act right now.
Yes.
And coming back to the point of public transport, I will keep public transport the same numbers, but clamp down on people coming out into the open.
Correct. Oh, yes, absolutely. And I think the only way we can do this is to come again and again and again, reiterate to the people, to the viewers, please stay at home unless and until it is absolutely urgent for you to step out. Nobody is above and beyond this disease. And we can only do our part by staying indoors as much as possible. In fact, Mr. Raghurandan has set the really tone for the conversation we are going to have next. Right now, we spoke about 6 things that have to be done to improve and ensure that we have a better lockdown. The next, we are going to focus on what the government needs to do to prepare for future. What if we go to the next stage? Are we really ready? That's going to be the focus. I'm going to take a very short break and come back with lots more. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for joining us on this conversation.